So as I said previously, we wanted to really go through what it is we're doing at Martek. So I wanted to go through the potable water testing and our sewage effluent. Um, Within that, I really wanted to show you what the legislation is, so we can learn what it is we have to do when it comes to both potable water and when it comes to sewage effluent testing. We're also then going to do a live demonstration of what it is we have available to make sure that you are compliant. And then we do have, since it's live, you can ask any questions as we go along, and I'll be happy to answer those at the end of the session. But moving swiftly on then, I think the first thing that we really need to look at is going to be MLC 2006. You know, like I say, we all hear about this daily, but what does it actually mean? What is it that I have to do to ensure that I'm compliant? Well, as you can see here, it is to ensure that seafarers have access to good quality food and drinking water provided under regulated hygienic conditions. And that regulated is really important. You know, we want to make sure that it's within certain parameters to make sure that they are going to remain safe and healthy under some kind of legislative body. So that is what the MLC 2006 was for. So now we just need to find out exactly what we have to do. So what it is we have to do is essentially follow this. You know, it's asking for frequent documented inspections of supplies, food and drinking water. Now, I know one of the things that I get asked a lot is, you know, what is frequent? Well, that's actually defined by any kind of competent authority. So that could be who? It would most likely be your flag state. In some cases, it could also be the class. So you need to make sure that you're always doing your inspections in accordance with that. Now, when it comes to testing, some people will say, well, I only need to do it maybe once a year as long as I get my lab tests. I'm going to quickly show you why that isn't the case. Now, we always talk about MLC 2006. All we really need to look at is this MSN 1845, and it's Regulation 34. Now, this is designed to actually be read alongside MLC 2006, and it's effectively a means of seeing what is and isn't acceptable. And what is really, really, really important to look at here is that the ship owner and master, so not just the master, but the ship owner as well, must ensure that food and drinking water provided, which did not contain anything which is likely to cause sickness, injury to health, or which renders any food or water unpalatable. So an example here from me would be, if you're going to test maybe once per year, how do you know that for the other, 364 days that there isn't something in that water? You know, how do you know that your crew aren't going to become ill at any point? Because although you may be getting that test done, you're not actually going to be compliant. You need to be doing it frequently. You need to be constantly checking to see whether or not there's anything that could affect your crew. And that's the only way that we can 100% for sure remain compliant. Now, one thing that I also wanted to look at as well before we start doing the tests is sewage effluent. You know, I think we've covered the legislation behind potable water, and that you do need to do it, you need to be doing it on board, and you need to be doing it frequently. There's also sewage effluent. Now, it was actually by the P&I Club very recently. It was number 1166, their announcement, where, especially in places like Singapore, the number of detentions for vessels is increasing and increasing, and it's all because of failures for MARPOL Annex 1, in particular, your sewage effluent. So with this, I just wanted to give you a quick way of knowing what it is you need to test for. So there's two little bits of legislation applying to this, and it applies just to the sewage treatment plant that you've got. So if you've got a treatment plant that was installed before the 1st of January 2016 and after the 1st of January 2010, you have to make sure that you are within these parameters. If you're not, your sewage treatment plant is failing and you are very likely to be detained. The only way to make sure that it is going to be constantly working is to test regularly, especially when you're within MARPOL special areas, so very close to ports within a certain distance from land, essentially. That's what you need to do. You need to be testing that. The other part of the legislation is, again, simple. Anything after the 1st of January 2016. Now, naturally, these are going to be newer systems, so they do have tighter regulations, and you need to be testing for this. So, what it is we're going to do now is we are going to go and actually show some tests. Now, since we've just been talking about the sewage, I wanted to show you our kit here. So our sewage effluent test is designed to test for everything. So you can get your coliforms, you can get your total suspended solids or your turbidity, you'll be able to get your BOD, your COD, and your pH, as well as your chlorine. Now you can test for all of that in literally half an hour. In fact, we'll be able to do a lot of it here now. But all you would need to do is start off with these 3 little containers. Now, for this kit, what we're going to do is we're essentially going to fill these up, just a little line here, making sure not to spill it. I can't imagine it's too nice of a job. And once we've done that, we'll be able to add the tests that are needed. So what it is we're actually doing with this test is we're going to be identifying the permanganate value. Now, I'll send you a little brochure at the end. It will come out at the end with this webinar. The permanganate value is a great way of actually assessing what your biological oxygen demand is and your chemical oxygen demand. So you can get both of that with this. Now, for your coliforms, for your turbidity, pH and chlorine, we're going to run through that when we do DrinkSafe. So this is just for these tests. But all you would need to do is firstly take some acidifying tablets. Now, with the kit that we provide, you'll be able to do this test 50 times, so you won't need to worry about actually running out of anything or constantly resupplying. But what you would do is you put 2 of each into each little container. And once they're dissolved, you'd normally use a tablet crusher like so. We would then add our PV or permanganate value tablets. Now, the whole idea of this is to effectively get a visual range. So what we're going to do is we're going to put 1 in the first, 2 in the second, and then 2 in there, and then 3 in the third. Now, as you can see, these are immediately changing colour. By putting different amounts in, you're going to get effectively different shades of it. It means that we've now got a good sample to check for. Now, what it is we're going to be doing in about 25 minutes, half an hour's time, is looking for any colour change. Now, as you can see already, actually we've got lighter and it's going darker as we go across. So if there's any kind of colour change or discoloration more than anything, you'll know that that isn't quite right. So for us, each will apply to a value. So this is 0 to 10 PV, this is 10 to 20, and this is 20 plus. And then essentially you just do a few little calculations and you'll get your BOD and your COD values. But from a visual perspective, if this starts to change immediately, especially this one here, we know that we've already got a problem and that these are both the biological oxygen compounds and the demand are going to be far too high. What I might do is put it onto full screen so we can even see it better. So that is that. What we're going to do is just put this, as I say, to the side for about half an hour, see if we actually get any colour change. So that is mostly sewage. Like I said, the main part of this though really was to show you our DrinkSafe kit and the different kind of tests that we have to get your values. So what we're going to start with is Legionella. Now, Legionella is a deadly disease. It can cause things like pneumonia and very, very serious illness. Now, we do have what Legionella has as per WHO guidelines, and that is effectively that it is inhaled by droplets of aerosols, so places like showers or air conditioners. We want to make sure that none of your crew are ever going to be exposed to this. So this is a great test because you can test literally within 25 minutes and get your positive or negative result. And you do want this to be negative. So all we would do is open up the test, have a look there, see what it looks like. And what you'll see is a little dash there and also a small circle there. Now, all we need to do for this to get that instant result on board is take your sample, place it onto the small dot here, and again, wait 25 minutes and we will get ourselves a positive or negative. Now, it does work just like a pregnancy test. So what you get is different lines on there, and you want to make sure that you are getting it to be, well, negative. So what we'll do is, in fact, you can already start to see, lift it slightly, that paper is changing already. I want to spill too much of the water out of there, but we'll come back to that at the end once we've actually got the results. So that is sort of our Legionella test. Like I say, very good for quickly checking. Now, the important thing is where you sample from as well. Legionella tends to grow in places where water is stagnant. So what you really need to be doing is taking a water sample with no sterilization of the taps or the showers, somewhere where you wouldn't often go. So we find when I went on board that a lot of vessels would have Legionella because they're just testing in maybe the galley, maybe up on the bridge. But really where you want to be looking is somewhere like the hospital or an unused cabin, somewhere like that, because that's where you're going to find this. So if it does get used and you are suddenly heating up water, that's where you can have serious problems. Another thing to note with Legionella as well is it tends to grow between 25 and 55 degrees. So when you're running and you're testing the temperature of your water, you want to make sure that when you're running it on hot for 60 seconds, that it's getting above that 55, and when it's going to cold, you want it to sort of ideally be below 25 and below 20 even. And that's going to make sure that you're not going to have that kind of water in there that can potentially cause more and more Legionella to grow. Because like I say, this could potentially be one of the most deadly things that we're looking at, and it is on a day-to-day basis that our crew and our seafarers are exposed to it. Now, moving on from Legionella, what we also need to look at is our other bacterial tests. Now with that, these do take a little longer than the sewage and the Legionella that we've just done, but they do give a good result. So according to the WHO guidelines, what we're testing for now is going to be coliforms and E. coli. You can also test for enterococci as well as some bacterial plagues. Now, the WHO guidelines state that for coliforms, it should be 0, so it should be negative. There should be no coliforms in 100 millilitres of water, and it's exactly the same for E. coli. So you need to be getting negative results every single time. When E. coli is things like when you felt really sick and food poisoning, that's what causes this. So what we can supply is this. This is our incubator. Now, all you would do is turn it on and leave it on for half an hour with the thermometer inside, and that's just to gauge how hot it is. Now, by leaving it on for half an hour or so, you want to make sure that that's getting to 35 degrees, and that's when we can start actually doing the tests. So what we're going to do first is our coliforms. So we'll always supply one of these, which is a sterile container. Now you'll see it looks like there is something inside of it. That's what's keeping it sterile. So when it comes like this, you don't want to wash it out. This is where you just want to get your sample from straight away and put it straight in. But again, really similar to the sewage effluent kit, all you want to do is fill this up to the 100 milliliter line. And wait for everything inside to dissolve. Now, once all of that has dissolved, that's when we'll actually go ahead and do our coliform and E. coli tests. Now, the best part of this is it is a dual test, so you'll be able to get both readings for coliform and E. coli with this. Again, really, really simple. All you need to do is open up your test, pour in the contents, and wait for it to dissolve again. Now you'll see immediately that this is starting to go a bit of a yellowy colour. And that's what we want to see. And you would also wait for this to dissolve as well. Just give it a quick shake. Right, there we go. So we've gone like a sort of cloudy, murky, yellowy colour. Now, once we've done that, all we would need to do is put it in the incubator and leave it there for 24 hours. That just allows these coliforms, it allows the bacteria to grow. And what you're going to be looking for is any colour change. Now, by colour change, it tends to be quite dramatic. Naturally, we don't have 24 hours now, so I did this one last night. And you can see it's completely changed colour. Now it's sort of a dark green, bluey colour. Now what this signifies to me is that the water I tested had coliforms in it. I under no circumstances want to be drinking that because that is going to make me sick. Now going back to the legislation, at no point can our water have this in it. It cannot have anything that could potentially make me sick. So if I was sailing around and it did this, I will not be compliant. And we'll be able to go ahead and try and clean that and disinfect the system. Now, like I said, this test is also used for E. coli. Now, with E. coli, what you would need to use is this, it's a UV lamp. What you would do, you may not be too easy in this light, but we'll see what we can do, is you put the UV lamp behind the little container, and see if it fluoresces. Now I can see it fluorescing, I'm not sure what it seems like on the camera. That means that there's also a present of E. coli. So the best place to do that would be in a darkened room, and that's where you'll know. Again, it's just an immediate way of saying, look, we have E. coli, we need to do something because if our crew are drinking this, if they're showering this, if they're cooking with this, if they're cleaning with this, we're going to have a serious issue, and it could potentially affect everything from the ability to sail to, you know, even having to get hospitalization involved. So that is our E. coli test. Now we also have a bacterial plate test. This is a really good way of seeing how your water treatment plant is actually working. So it's a way of allowing a majority of different bacteria to grow and to actually establish whether or not the disinfection is working, if our water treatment plant is working, anything like that. So what we would do is use one of these, bacterial plate test. Now with this, again, really similar to what it is we do. We would just use 10 ml of water and place it on to the onto the plate. And once we've done that, we would simply put it in the incubator, just as we did with the E. coli and the coliforms test. Now this one takes 48 hours. As I say, it's just a really good way of seeing whether or not your system's working. Now again, I started to do one yesterday. As you can see, some small growths starting to get there on that. Now what it is we would do is we would simply count these. Now often they will go bright red, and essentially you just be able to see how many of these that we've got growing. Again, really good to be able to do on board, something that you can constantly check on, and it really takes no input from anyone like your master or your chief engineer. Simply put a very small amount of your water on there, you get it in your incubator, and you make it start, and you let it grow. So that's really the bacterial plate test. Now I mentioned we also have enterococci. We don't want things to be difficult for you when you're doing this, so it works exactly the same as your coliforms and your E. coli. It takes exactly the same amount of time. It's just a different sachet that you use, and that's how you'll be able to get that result as well. And that is something that we also provide for you in our DrinkSafe Max kit. Now, another test that we need to show you, and it comes again in our DrinkSafe Max and sewage, is turbidity, or total suspended solids. So turbidity is essentially the visual way of looking for total suspended solids. It's the same thing. And what it is you're going to be doing is, I'm not going to do it 100% here because I will pour water all over myself, is to see whether or not it's safe. Now this is the sewage effluent. All you would do is you would fill this up to the top of the line, And as you can see at the bottom, there is a small black cross. Now, if you're looking down and it's filled with water and you can see that black cross, you're going to be fine. You're going to be within regulations, which is going to be drinking water under 5 NTU. And as long as you're within that, you're compliant. If not, what you would do is you'd start pouring the water away until you can see that black cross again, and then you can mark your result. That isn't really where we want to be. Yes, it's good to get the result, but the first thing we need to be thinking of as well is we need to clean this, we need to disinfect this. So that's how we would do our bacterial plates or bacterial tests. But a lot of it falls under, we can get rid of this if we actually disinfect the system like we do. And a lot of the time that's going to be through high amounts of chlorine. The issue with things like chlorine and pH is that they can also have an adverse effect on the human body. Now, chlorine, according to WHO guidelines, needs to be within certain ranges, and that would be if you're in, worldwide, they'll say anywhere between 0.5 milligrams a litre and 1. But you do need to be mentioned, or need to be aware, in some places like in Europe, that needs to be no more than 0.6 milligrams per litre, so it can change depending on where you are. So what we have is our comparator discs method. So with this, we do provide you a fair number of these. You'd be looking at 250 of each, where we can actually do all kinds of chlorine. So that is going to be your free chlorine, your total chlorine, combined chlorine, and also high range chlorine. Now, all you would do for this is get your 2 samples and your comparator, your disc, and your tablet. Now, this is an instant test. You will get a result straight away. And all we would do is, again, fill this up to the line. And the other one as well. And use this to get our reading. There we go. So a comparative method, like I say, it's an instant way of seeing. What you'll see is a number of different colours on there and a number of numbers. Now what it is we would do is we would insert our comparator here. And as you can see, we've now got a coloured side, a clear side. Clear side is your control. But the middle bit, even this end bit, is for your control. So we would just put a single test tube in there filled with water. Now this one is where we're going to put our tablet. Now I'm going to be doing free chlorine at the moment. All we would do is put 1 tablet in there. Shake it and wait for it to dissolve. So let's get the tablet crusher. We can do that immediately. We've got slightly too much water in this one. Now with that, what we'd start to see is some colour change. And what we would do is we would hold it to the light and get what colour it is. Now, as I say, there's a few different types of chlorine, free, total, combined, and high range. Essentially, what the difference between all of these are and why it's important is your free chlorine is what is available left in your system to sanitize your water. So you want to have some in there, which is why those ranges are 0.5 to sort of 1 milligrams per litre. Your total chlorine is essentially the amount of chlorine that has been used up and the chlorine that was used to sanitize it. So you can figure out all of this by using both DPD1 and DPD3. Now, the final kind that we also do is high range chlorine. Now, the only difference between that one is that you would use an acidifying tablet, like we did with the sewage kit as well. And with that, essentially what you would get is if you've just done a kind of a disinfection. So you're expecting there to be higher ranges, which a normal comparative method wouldn't pick up. Just a good way of seeing where it is, so you can essentially clean everything to make sure it's back down where it needs to be. But another thing really to be aware of is going to be pH. So pH is essentially whether something's acidic, whether it's alkaline, And again, it's mentioned in the WHO guidelines that it needs to be between 6.5 and 8. Now, the reason that's important is it needs to be under 8 in order for your chlorine disinfection to work effectively as well. So it can affect things like that. But it can also affect things actually on the vessel as well. Now, if you've got something incredibly acidic, you're much more likely to have corrosion within the main pipes, and that can actually pose a serious risk at a later date, just because that is what can potentially stop anything working or some seriously big maintenance. So again, just like the other test, what we would do is fill our samples to the 10 milliliter line, crush the tablet, and start getting our result. So pH for us, it will show as phenol red. There we go. It's dissolving a little bit quicker. Put in our comparator and see where we are. So for this one, for instance, we can see it's quite orange. Hold it to the light, keep turning. That is going to be the best we can get, I believe, as you can see. So by looking in the small arrow at the bottom, we're going to be looking at 7.2. So bang on exactly where we need to be. I know that this is safe. I know that I can drink this. I know that the chlorine inside has been working exactly as it should be. And I know that I'm not going to get ill from anything from drinking that water there. And that is the tests that we offer. Everything is, as you can see, really, really simple. Now, I know that we had this booked down for an hour, but one thing I really wanted to highlight is, does the chief engineer have that much time on board to spend an hour doing water testing every single week, month, however often it is that you want to do it for? And the answer is probably going to be no. You know, you want something that you can do very quickly, you can get your instant results, and then you can move on and do everything else. And that's what it's all about for us, is we wanted our kit to be really easy to use, very quick to use, but also affordable as well. So that is what it is we do. Now, I know that we've got some questions. This was live for us. Once we've done the questions, we can have a look and see how our Legionella and our sewage are working. So, do have a few, actually, probably have to see my laptop's over here. The first is, how often do I need to carry out testing on board? Again, difficult to say. I wouldn't be able to say a specific time. That'll be dedicated by your flag. But just don't forget that you can at no point ever have anything that can cause sickness or cause harm to any of your crew. At no point can you have that. Now, just by going on the people who I work with that have this, they tend to test once a month. If they find that there is an issue, they tend to speed that up to get back up to a baseline, and then they'll slowly and gradually phase it out. It was a good question. What do I need to do if I found out that my water is contaminated? Again, great question. First things first, you can always come to me and show me the results. I'm more than happy to have a look. But the best thing for your crew to do is actually follow your own procedures in decontaminating it. It could be releasing the water and most likely then doing a superchlorination of the entire system to make sure that you can then go back to normal potable water. And that would need to be done as soon as possible. We should never be putting anybody at risk by waiting maybe a day or so. This is an instant change that needs to happen. Let's have a look. So how is DrinkSafe in compliance with current regulations? I think we've seen the regulations that allows for your frequent documented inspections. We provide you with a logbook. We're also working on an electronic format of that as well for you. And that just means that you can get all of your frequent documented inspections. It allows you to get both positive and negative results for your bacterial plates, for your chemical tests. So we're compliant in that sense as well. So this is completely MLC 2006 compliant. Let's see what else we've got. So what is the implication of not complying with this? Will I buy fined or worse? That's a really good question, actually. I think when it comes to things, I mean, if we have a look at other legislation, you know, MARPAL Annex 4 has been around for a while, but it's only recently where vessels are getting detained more and more and more. Now, that's how legislation works, and that's how it can often work with people coming on board and actually looking. Now, I think best case scenario, you'll be hit with potentially a fine, but most likely needs to be rectified before departure, so a possible detention. The reason is, it clearly says in the legislation that you can't have anything on board that can cause sickness or illness to your crew. So they will not allow you to sail on afterwards. And I think that would be best case scenario. Worst case, not complying, not caring, you can get some serious illnesses, and that could cause, again, serious problems. It could be lack of crew being able to work, which can have serious implications for the business at a later date. Will this be enough for all port authorities? Really, really good question as well. So port authorities will like to see this test. They really will, because it shows that you are MLC compliant and that you're actually doing the test, you're doing them frequently, and that you're on top of water control. So they will like to see this for sure. Now, when it comes to things like lab testing, some ports will like to see a lab test, some will like to see it on board, majority will like to see both. So when it comes to an actual lab test, I would still recommend you getting one per year. That's just to get everything sorted and you've got your certificate. This, though, like I said previously, is to allow for that constant testing. If you only get it done once per year in a lab, you don't know about those 11 months where you could potentially be putting your crew at risk and be uncompliant. And that's why it is that we want to go ahead and use this as well. And by using this on board, you'll be able to cover all of the bases. That seems to be a lot. Let's see. Yes, sample points. So how does a vessel decide on the sampling points? Really, really good question. I think they need to be slightly random. So I wouldn't be choosing the same sample points at all time. When it comes to Legionella, like I say, you want to be looking somewhere that isn't often used, like a hospital, like an unused cabin. Now, when it comes to things like your E. coli and your coliforms, you really want to be sampling from sort of somewhere really high, so like the bridge and probably the galley as well. That way you can get a sample from different areas. Now, I should have mentioned before you do this, I would also sterilize the tap beforehand. The reason is you want to be testing your water here. You don't want to be testing anything that could be in that tap. So all it is you would need to do is run your tap for 60 seconds on hot, run your tap for 60 seconds on cold, and then immediately fill up your sample container with that water. That is how I would best do it for your bacterials other than Legionella. And the same goes for pH as well. Be able to use that same sample water from, say, the bridge and from the galley, from places very, very clear there, or near to there, sorry, I should say, so you can actually get the test that you need. By IMO regulation, what parameters is necessary check? So this would be part of the Convention 78, and what you're going to look for there is things like your microbial quality. So like I say, with your E. coli and your coliforms, you're looking for your pH and other chemical parameters. So we've had a look into this, and this is everything. Now, what I can do is send through the presentation at the end of this, so you've got it just to see that legislation. I'll get that ILO Convention 78 on there as well, just highlighting absolutely everything that needs to be done. But essentially that's going to be pHs, it's going to be chemicals and biological parameters. So with that, I think it's probably best time now to see how it's going with the sewage. Right, so good news for us on this one. As you can see, the colours have remained pretty constant when it comes to any colour change or discoloration. That's a great sign for us, because that knows that our permanganate value is going to be low, and therefore it is going to be working exactly as it should when it comes to your BID, COD. So that's a really good sign from here. One thing that I did do, it was a few weeks ago, so I also got the water for the coliform, is I went to a local lake and we did the sewage effluent testing there. If you want to see what it looks like to be discoloured, more than happy to send across a video of that as well. And it just shows the difference, but we'll go almost a little bit clear. But what I guess is important is going to be looking for our Legionella. And that will very nearly be done. I believe that it's going to be working very well. And there we go. So we've just got a single line. So we are okay for Legionella. But that's really how quick this is. You know, if we think this really is a deadly, potentially bacterial disease, we want to make sure that we're not having this on board. And I think that sometimes when looking at labs, which, don't get me wrong, fantastic way of getting your results, they can take, you know, 3-4 weeks sometimes. If you're sailing around with something like Legionella on board, it's definitely not where you need to be. But that's really everything. So we've covered the tests. This is what our kit can do. I think one thing to highlight is the fact that we can also offer sewage alongside this. But if there's any more questions, let me know. You can always got my email as well. You ask them there. But thank you very much for getting involved, for actually learning more about the legislation, learning more about how to do these tests. And I'll be more than happy to help out in the future should there be anything else you need. But again, thank you very much for your time, for staying in today, and hopefully I'll see you all soon.